Hey everybody, welcome to Color Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. I'm your host, Marcus Lloyd, and with me as always is Mr. Antoine.
What's up, everybody?
How you doing, man? You good?
Mostly.
Mostly.
I am mostly good.
Okay.
For the most part, I am good.
I like that. I mean, you can't always be perfectly
Can't be right all the time. I mean, it's just it's a moment of authenticity.
That's fair. I think people want vulnerability and authenticity when they watch these and listen to these.
They do want.
That's good. We got other people in the studio as always. We haven't really spent much time engaging them a little bit, so I want to just give a shout out. Shmevin in the booth engineering today. Shmevin, how you doing today, brother? You all right?
What's up, man? I'm good.
Good.
Shmev.
He comes in strong, ready to go. He's in his lair.
Yeah.
He is. In his evil. Evil.
The evil,
Right.
like Megamind or something. Just in there, just going.
People always make the Megamind joke.
Do they about
always
you?
making the Megamind joke.
I feel like.
I mean, if you look close,
like you've made the Megamind joke. So,
that's all right. It works. In the midst of, he's blue and he's blue in there too.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's
It's my
just
Megamind lair.
That's all right. Well, welcome, Megamind. Glad you're in here, and of course, we got Pepper in the studio.
You said you wanted vulnerability. I am
Yes.
not a hey everybody.
Oh,
I
you're
am more
not?
of a
it's one of them today.
You're not in the hey everybody mode?
no, I guess not.
Okay, that's okay.
I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go on.
I mean, we got a
No.
lot of show to do, so you might get into that mode
I
as we
mean,
go through.
I like the not so good pepper.
I don't know if you. I mean, for the most part, Pepper, that is you. I mean, so I think we
What?
get the not so.
Oh, okay.
Hey, everybody, kind of.
yeah, no, that's not me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is the
That's what I meant by
vulnerability.
that.
That was nervous me.
That,
Doesn't know what to do.
that's the representative. We finally,
Yeah,
Yes, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's right.
finally broke through.
That's a pastor's wife. Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
That's all right.
There
That's
you
all
go.
right.
But now,
Yeah.
now that we know each other,
That's right.
yeah.
We're in for another episode of Color Commentary. So glad you guys are here listening, watching, and those who are listening as well on your listening places for your podcasts.
And-
Welcome
yeah.
to the show. So let's get started. Pepper, give us, we like to go into our segment of Say What?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So Pepper, you're already like ready and
Yeah.
warmed up.
Yep. Let's do it. You
I'm
ready?
interested in this one. Give
This
it
is
to
a
me.
good one.
Give it to me.
Again,
I'm not ready, but
This is a list that we all pull and
Okay.
add to. This
Okay.
is not just things
Out
that I have
of Pepper's
said.
text.
Yeah.
That's right. All her texts. Marcus, can
We
you
went
tell me why?
We
Yep,
went through her text messages
Nope.
and just
And
pulled.
emails and Facebook.
That's
My
right.
Facebook for sure.
This was the list of things that she said to Marcus, and he said, "Why don't you write that down? We'll talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
it."
talk
that's
about that
right.
later.
We'll put
this
it in
is
your
actually
eval.
my eval. Yes.
Is this her
No.
eval list? Here's what I want you to
Okay.
work on from
And
now
on that note, we've got a good one today. You
Okay,
ready?
go for it. Let's see what you got.
Isn't code switching just deceiving white people?
Ooh. Oh.
Well, Marcus,
What-
isn't it?
What? So
Duh.
I'm not sure everybody knows what code switching is.
Okay.
Right. So code switching, in terms of how at least I've thought of code switching, is particularly. I'll give my experience. I know that there are ways in which I'm supposed to present myself in situations in which I present myself less the stereotypical version of black in those spaces. So if I go into a predominantly white space, if I go into a space where there's business going on, there's this assumption that to present in a very like natural, comfortable black way, if you will not be accepted. And so what people of color will do, and I'm saying specifically black people, they will present themselves differently. They'll present themselves differently in how they dress, how they talk, and maybe even the subject matter at which they may talk about in that setting. So that would be a code switching. Is that fair? I mean, am I missing something?
Yeah. Man, I remember when I was in high school, like I learned that if I was walking down the hallway, I went to a suburban Richardson here in Texas, Lake Highlands. If you're from Texas, then, but there was mostly white people there when I was going.
Okay.
And I was walking down the hall, and for the white dudes that I saw, I'd throw my head up. And for the brothers that I saw, I threw my head down.
Okay.
The picture of the code switch, just
Okay.
with body language.
Is this like this reminds me of like that meme that goes around with Barack Obama?
That's right. That's
And
right.
they put like the different neighborhoods in the community,
That's
like when he
right.
comes in, so he's dapping up the more black areas
Yeah.
and he's shaking hands with the
Yeah.
more predominantly white areas. That's
Yeah.
kind of the code
Yeah.
switching, right?
But is it deceptive though?
Is Is it deceptive?
Decept is the big word. That's quite the accusation.
So how would we maybe
there's another reason.
Well, I'm just trying to think of like it's deceptive. Deceptive only makes it sound like a pejorative, right? Like,
it makes it sound malicious or whatever.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Like you're a deceiver or liar.
Right, exactly. So, is it being completely authentic? Is it being completely vulnerable? No, it's not. Right. But the question becomes, why? Is that the desired way in which black people would like to present themselves in the space?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you take it out of the racial conversation,
yeah, that's fair,
and you say, "Hey, I work at JCPenney,"
yeah,
and people come up and they talk to you while they're working at like you code switch to a customer service agent. You know, you don't talk like you talk at home. You talk like you talk like a customer service person. You know, or when you know what I'm saying, or you know, if you're waiting tables, you know, like there's a certain way that you talk that's acceptable in society for what you think people expect from you in that moment. I don't know that it's deceptive. It's just, it's pretty normal to code switch across the board anyway. The question is, you know, why do people of color feel they need to code switch around white people in certain scenarios? But I think code switching as a concept is relatively normal. Like none of us are who we are authentically all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful word. I mean, I think of the term verisimilitude, which is you act the way you are supposed to act based on the position or the place that you are in.
Yeah.
So we use all the time in the midst of the public square. You think about elections, presidential elections. What's one of the things we're always looking for? Do they act presidential?
Yeah.
Right? Do they speak presidential, act presidential? So that's a kind of, I don't know if these cats are like this every time they leave, right? But when they're in front of the camera, they are code switching to a way in which they are expected to act in a situation. But to your point, it's like, is there something different about, say, a black person coming in? Is there a different kind of feeling about a black person coming into a white space and acting, quote unquote, themselves, if you will? Is there something?
Yeah, I think
different about that?
Obviously, I mean, I feel like this wouldn't be news to people, but most black people, or at least historically, coming out of like slavery and all that stuff, right? In that time period, you didn't want to be a threat, because to be threatening or to cause problems or be someone who seemed as though they were going to be a problem was dangerous for you.
Okay.
So code switching was a survival mechanism for a long time, at least for black people, and probably at some point for many persons of color across history of America anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can see code switching. I'm thinking about when our Asian brothers and sisters came over and they changed their names to make it easier for people to say. Right. That could be a code switch.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like it was a survival mechanism, and because I keep hearing like these movies where you have the older black person and then you have the younger black person that's like ready to stands up or says something assertive to some white person, and the black person like, hey, pipe down, you know. Mm-hmm. These are good white folk, you know. They're gonna they take care of us. We don't want no trouble. We don't want no trouble, you know. And so it's just kind of I wonder if that just kind of some of that just passed along generation to generation and just take on a kind of evolution. Because I know that in the corporate world, you know, there seems to be a certain behavior that's acceptable, but that seems to be set by white culture.
I think that's the huge piece, right? Is that the acceptability that we're trying to engage, if you will, the things that have been created as and defined as acceptable have been defined in our predominantly white society by white people, right? You could say that if you go to India, same thing. Like the Indian people have determined this is the thing that's acceptable to be acceptable in their context. So here in America, white people have set the context of what is acceptable, right? And so when you come into that space and you are not, you don't do those things, you are considered unacceptable. So, and there's a history, right? There's a history of kind of the ways in which historically, when you think about the racial categories, black people particularly have been at the bottom of the racial categories. And so anything that we do has been considered less. And if there's things that are very specific to how we communicate, how we move, those things have been considered less, right? Much like if you were thinking about opera versus musical theater, right? Like musical theater is a lesser form than opera. Gospel in our country has been a lesser form than CCM or something, right? These kinds of things. So I think that there's an issue there in that the environment has been defined, and anybody coming in has to be successful, has to adhere to that. And you're thinking about, so you got your hairstyle, right? You and I used to have the same hairstyle when we first met, right? And so mine changes all the time, right? But I've got these dreadlocks. And I've had several people who knew me, say, 10 years ago, who have seen me recently come in contact, and almost to quotes, they're like, oh, I guess you're not doing that clean cut thing anymore, right? Or I used to like when you had that GQ look, you know what I mean? So there's a sense of like, what is this look that you have? It's not acceptable, right? Dreadlocks have been connected and put into an unacceptable mode. So when you come into that space, they got to go, right? And we've seen that with the Crown Act in California, and folks being oppressed or kept from doing things because of their hairstyles, right? And so a code switching would be, I'm gonna straighten my hair. If I'm thinking of black women, I'm gonna straighten my hair to look more like white women, so I will be, quote unquote, not only successful in those areas, but to be considered pretty. Right. And that happens to black women, right? When they straighten their hair, they're like, oh my gosh, I love your hair. It's so pretty. Right. And it's because it has now become this norm in this form. So.
Yeah. It takes us back to the white privilege conversation we had a long time ago, where something has to be normal, and somebody sets that normal, and then everyone has to kind of adhere to that normal, or they are abnormal.
Yeah.
Or they are weird. And there's a consequence and a privilege to being normal, and no, not normal.
Right. But is it deceptive?
Is it? I don't think it's. I think that's a weird. Whoever said that feels.
Pepper. What do you think?
Yeah. Pepper.
You want to further explain yourself?
Yeah, can you tell us why you texted that to Marcus in the middle of the night?
I cannot. No. Sorry.
No, I think that person feels some weird right toward
to be able to have access.
Yeah,
to the fullness
to someone's full self, and it even also potentially signals that they feel that they have freedom to be themselves all the time, and can't connect to the concept of someone having to adjust their behavior in order to fit into something, or I keep saying to survive, and I'm raising it to the level of survive because I think survive is it like you will get fired.
Right. It's not survive like somebody's going to stab you.
That's right. But like it only takes one. So I feel like it only takes one or two times for me to lose it in a work scenario, for someone to be like, hey, that's not it. Where I'm not sure that that's the way it is for everybody.
Right. Yeah. Right. And look, and I've been disconnected in some ways from my. I remember at the last church I worked at, I was told by somebody on the staff, like, when they heard about this idea of code switching, they're like, I really want you to be you. I want you to feel free to be you. And what's ironic is when I got up and I was me fully, like I was saying things about what it means to be black in the midst of a white church. It became the moment that ultimately set me on the pathway to not be able to stay at that church anymore. So I remember telling that person, they're like, I want you to be you. And I was like, you don't want me to be you. The people around here don't actually want that. Yeah. They like the look, but they don't want my life. Right. Yeah, they don't want to engage on that. Pepper, did you have something?
Yeah. Antoine, you said it's something that you needed to do for survival. And that brought up something in my brain of like, you understand code switching unless you've never had to curb your behavior in order to fit in.
Yeah. You saying you don't understand it unless you've had to do that?
Yes. Like if somebody is saying, aren't you just deceiving by code switching, then that person maybe has clearly never had to curb anything about their personality in order to fit in. And like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, this is not. I mean, generally, that's not even a racial thing. That's just generally they've been able to move through space without having to curb themselves.
And deceptive sounds like I'm trying to trick you, I'm trying to swindle you, and it's not any of that.
But not swindle and trick you. But I am trying to make you feel comfortable.
I mean, it's a motivation issue, right? I mean, so like we all, like you said, we all change how we act in different environments. To me, the person who says you're trying to trick me, it's like you took away my ability to have prejudice against you because I didn't recognize who you were because you acted a different way.
Yeah. How dare you? How dare you not let me be a little bit racist? I
Which is
deserve,
why
I deserve the right to be just a little bit racist if that's who you are.
But I do want to I do want to push it.
No,
I do want to
just joking.
challenge. I do want to challenge that motivation piece, Shmevin, because I know it can be very tempting to sort of use the code switching to get what you want,
Sure.
and to not only create a better spot for you to survive, but to create a better spot for you to thrive, right? Where you can be disingenuous about the relationship that you're engaging and only engage them as as the representative, if you will, for the entire time, and not let people in, and in fact, control in such a way that you don't let people in. And I think that's a harmful thing for relationship building in this racial space. Now, I'm not saying you go out and immediately throw in the vulnerability at the top, but at some point you've got to let certain aspects in to see if the relationship is real. And if they can't accept you, like this church I was at before, as soon as it started being real, they couldn't accept me, then we now know that we've got an issue to engage on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So, hey, I guess that's good question. I'm glad you thought about that last night and
didn't solve it, but no,
that's all right.
That's okay.
It's a yes or no. I don't know.
It's okay.
It's just we just need to know the things behind it. That's the same.
It's not deceptive. It's just not.
It's
authentic.
It's not deceptive.
It's just not
survival.
authentic.
It's just not authentic.
Yeah.
And
I'm okay with it being not authentic.
Okay.
I don't want to be my authentic self to everybody.
I agree. You don't need to do that because it's. All right. Look, that's been another.
I now want to be.
Now you want to be completely authentic.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Another segment of say what. So it's good.
Sayeth what?
Hey, as we're transitioning into the conversation, I just want to make note of this wonderful T-shirt that I'm wearing. Antoine, do you see it? Have you seen it? Pepper, do you
Behold.
check it out?
You know I love good merch.
Yeah, good merch is good. We do have merch, right? We got merch for a lot of things, but Color Commentary is one of those things that we have merch for. So if you want to be a part of the Color Commentary family, get some merch, get a hat, get a shirt, a couple of different types of shirts. Ladies got some specific things for
Why
you.
not?
Yeah, go to wearethreaded.org/shop. That's right. And there you will find lots of things, not only for Color Commentary, but also for Threaded. You will not find this here. This is special made for us on the show, but that's the Threaded piece that you'll see. So, although we can probably make some.
I know. I'm gonna be rapping soon. I don't have my stuff yet.
Yeah, that's right. We had some new things.
I'll get it directly.
Yeah. So wearethreaded.org/shop. Check it out. What we need to do is we need to get some merch probably around this Christianity the Public Square, because that's the series that we are in the midst of, and I know some folks will want to have that as well. So today, we're going to be talking about. As far as Christianity Public Square goes, the question I'm curious about is, we've had these convos about Christians and how they engage the public square, but I'm curious today to talk about, can Christians go too far in the public square? Can we go too far? So that's, boom, right there in the middle of the room. Who wants to go first?
Well, no, of course not.
What, you saying no, Christians can't go too far?
Of course not. Yeah, we can go.
Okay.
We can go all the way. No,
My church is selling merchandise for Christianity in the public. No, no.
That's going too far.
That's going too.
They have to bring it over here so we can. Yeah.
Obviously, I think yes.
Yeah, I think this is. I know that this was when we started this, and we had a lot of conversation.
Yeah.
About politics and power and things of that nature. I know in our own conversation, you'll push to like, this is why I'm not comfortable.
Yeah.
In certain aspects of Christians in the public square aspect, right? Or at least where government becomes the answer to the woes, right? Is that safe?
Yeah, I suppose you say too far for.
Yeah, that's fair.
For what? Like
okay.
What exactly is the goal?
Okay.
Like, is the goal, and this is where it gets tricky for me.
All right.
Like I told you in the past.
Yeah,
Is the goal to have America live up to its ideals that it declares for itself in the Constitution?
Yeah.
Or is the goal to turn America into this kingdom, of God, mirror of heaven, through government? And I think those are two different questions, because those are two different goals. Those are two different pictures.
Okay.
So is the question? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you were going to rephrase the question.
No, I was going to ask. So when we say, can Christians go too far in the public square? You have to ask, well, what is it that we're trying to accomplish as Christians in the public square?
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the two things that you gave is, really looking at the public square being the American context, which is what we'll talk about in this terms. We'll look at the American context. So in that context, are Christians working really hard to make sure the ideals of America are being followed? Or are they working too hard to make America into a Christian kingdom, or to revive America as the Christian kingdom that people believed it was from its outset, right? To redeem it, to bring it back, to renovate, remake. I don't know. I'm making up our words. So I think we can go too far. Now, and I'm going to go in the sense of, I think though, when I think about it in that second version of this Christian kingdom, because I don't believe that I don't believe America is a Christian nation, nor do I believe that it was ever a Christian nation. I mean, in the terms of actual Christianity, right? Which I make these differentiations between Christendom and Christianity. I don't think, even as
is
it moved
capital
forward,
C Christian America,
right?
Christian country, or little C,
right?
Country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we're in this mode right now where I'm seeing Christians in the public square, and this isn't new, but Christians in the public square really pushing for the oversight, if you will, of Christians in all levels of power, including governmental, right? Particularly in terms of Christian nationalism, right? That's a big piece of it, right?
Right. Yeah, there's people who believe that that's what Christians should be pursuing. I would wonder is, to those people, and then maybe we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about this with some of our guests in the future or what have you, but I'm curious to know, like, do they think that way about every country? Like, should every country be Christian nationalists, or like should anyone in any country pursue, or is it just America? Like, is this an American exceptionalism kind of thing?
Should Christians at all times be looking to pursue the creation and the I guess the creation of a
theistic government,
right? Right. Is that the role of Christians as they move into new spaces, is to turn wherever they are into a Christian led governed entity, right?
So can I interject?
Well, of course you can, Pat.
Thanks.
Yeah.
When I come across this a lot, there's two things. Yes, I think people would say, if you're for this, people would say, yes, any nation should be this. But I think that people that are in this camp only see America as the only Christian nation.
Okay.
And they would say, if God is the true God and this is truth, why would we not want the nation to be Christian or to see heaven? Doesn't that mean heaven on earth? And they kind of lump all of that in together.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that makes that answers the question for that person. Their answer is not America as America says of itself. Their question is, I don't care what America says of itself. We want it to be a Christian nation because to be a Christian is to Christianize our world.
Yeah, that word is one word that starts with a C that works with, but colonize is probably one that we've had more experience with, because this is not new, right? Like this idea of going to places and quote unquote Christianizing the places. This comes out of this doctrine of discovery, that when the Western version of Christianity was starting to go into different places, particularly looking for resources, different land to own, things of that nature, the papal bulls that were written by several of the leaders throughout the church were giving them the permission to go places, and the idea was Christianized, right? Like you see these portraits and these pictures of folks like Christopher Columbus landing on certain places, and they come with a sword in their hand and a cross, or a sword and a Bible, right? And there was this connection to conquering and Christianity,
And bread and wine. Yeah.
Exactly, bread and wine. This Eucharistic sort of thought process of not only am I coming there to take advantage of the space, the land, but I actually because I'm a Christian, I have the right of God to expropriate the people and the resources in the land. It's my divine right as a Christian, and anybody who is not a Christian ultimately becomes less than, and they do not have the same rights to their own survival, their own resources, their own land and ownership and things like that. So this idea is not new. I still wonder, like, based on how you said it, Pep. Like, I don't know if most people in Christian who are kind of moving into this Christian nationalist space in this day and age are thinking about Christianity in any other part of the world. I think they're trying to make America the beacon of Christianity for the world. And in some ways, they believe they're coming back to something that America was at one point.
And as a general statement, like those words, I don't have a problem with. What I have a problem with is the methodology. Like, in other words, I think America could be a Christian outpost. I don't think that we need the government. The government doesn't need to be how it happens, though. Like we don't have to seize the power of the government to do it.
Okay, so how do you become an outpost without governance? Without the government?
In a democracy, right, Christians have so great an effect. And the church has so great an effect in our country that people are attracted to the Christian way of life, whether the government dictates it or not.
Okay.
And if we are effective at that, if the witness is strong, then we as a country end up embodying Christian values anyway. We don't, and therefore we don't need the laws to dictate it. We don't, it's the effect. Again, we're back on the bottom up versus the top down. But I think we could achieve that same level of witness for the rest of the world, whether we had it through governmental power, political power, or not. The reason you have political power is to correct. For instance, like we have to have a minimum wage because we are innately exploitive.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have a minimum wage, then somebody will make it normal to not pay people well for the work that they do because innately we are exploitive. But if we were a Christian nation and embodied the values of Christianity, truly, we wouldn't actually need that law because we wouldn't be exploitive. You know what I'm saying? So the government wouldn't have to impose that. We would just be that. And so that's what I'm saying. I think it could be from the bottom up. If the church had the effect on society as a moral agent, then I think the laws wouldn't be as necessary. The laws are necessary because we are not very good at being witnesses.
So would there be no laws at all?
There would be laws, but they don't need to be Christian, informed. They don't need to be theologically
grounded,
theocratic, I guess. Okay. Laws. We would still probably have don't steal, don't murder, those sorts of things. But a lot of these other things, like a lot of these different rules and things that we have, it's because we're in a depraved society. Yep. And changing the laws doesn't make us any less depraved.
But the laws that you're pointing back to, you said we would still need like don't steal, don't murder. Like you're pointing back to like the 10 Commandments type laws, like the laws that we founded in Scripture, and we're seeing,
but are also like in most civilizations.
Yeah, but we're seeing we are seeing some of that on a national level where there are pushes from Christians to make those laws more prominent, and they're using their Christian position to say we're a Christian nation, therefore we should be having these laws of God in front of people.
But I would say that those laws aren't innately Christian. Like they are laws that most people agree with, whether they're Christians or not. The Christian stuff has to do specifically with Christ, the gospel, the Christocentric values and principles that and that's different, right? Because there's a series, there's a series of countries. It's illegal to steal everywhere.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And murder everywhere and do a series of certain things everywhere. Like just the general rules of civilization. There's a base level of moral code that's everywhere. So I think that we would still have those things. it's the Christianization part that I think would, if America's going to be a Christian nation, it won't be because the laws are Christian. It's because the people are Christians, true Christians.
Right.
And I don't know that we've done a good job at helping the people be Christians.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. One is probably, Shmev, thinking about what you're saying, I think the difference in where you guys are talking about it is the people who are going out and wanting to put these laws, these 10 laws, if you will, into place, they want the 10 commandments, right? They want the biblical 10 commandments. It wasn't just, hey, let's together as a country come up with this 10 things that we think would be good, because some of those commandments aren't necessarily, when you say, the idea of not use God's name in vain and things of that nature, these are some of the things that are very specific to a Jewish law, if you will, and Judeo-Christian sort of approach.
Sure, keep the Sabbath.
Right, exactly, those kinds of things. And so I think you're onto something in that there's a collective understanding that we could have as a country where we come together and decide, hey, what are our 10 commandments? Again, going to the idea of America being its own country by itself that's not led by Christianity. We're probably going to find that most Americans want 10 things in there, but it's the idea that we are going to make the 10 commandments, the Christian 10 commandments, be in schools. We're going to make the Bible be in schools, and that becomes something that is lorded over and made. I think that's where some people would say, no, it's not just the generality of good moral things. Like, we want the Bible there, in there. And I would also wonder, based on what you're talking about, like, I think there's people out there who are, or maybe even listening, like, we and I'm going to say this in some ways tongue in cheek, because I'll come back and fix it in a minute. In some ways, we were a country like what you were saying earlier, right? We were a country that was a Christian outpost, right? That was, quote unquote, governed by Christian laws and Christian values. And you can even look at it in terms of global Christianity as far as the ways things moved. It used to be like 1900 and above, most of those people who were traveling, if you will, as Christians to other places to talk about the Judeo-Christian version of who God is, was coming out of the West. And now what we find is that it used to be, from the West to the rest. Now it's from everywhere to everywhere. It's there's these multiple outposts and these multiple polygenesis sort of places that it's living throughout the world. And so Christianity is outposting all over. But I think a lot of people might look back and say, well, we were the outpost and now we're not. So we need to reclaim this outposting, right?
Yeah, but if we were, it wasn't because there were Christian laws, though. We weren't a theocracy.
Okay. So you're differentiating the theocratic sort of.
Yeah, if we're talking about Christian nationalism, we weren't a Christian nationalist state in that era. If you're going to give us credit in that era, and you and I both know that there's a lot of things that aren't quite right.
Yeah. I will fix that in a minute.
But if you're going to give us credit for that era, it wasn't because, prayer in school didn't make us a Christian nation. But
that's what I'm saying. Some people would be like, that's a big piece that change that took it. In fact, a lot of people would articulate that as the moment when everything went downhill. You talk about when they took prayer out of schools and all of a sudden everything went to, HE double hockey stick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could have said hell. I guess I could have just said hell. This is my show. I can say hell.
I suppose you say what you want. Yeah. So that's what we would disagree because we still had a Bill of Rights that said, you can worship whatever God you want. I used to, when I was dating Lisa,
your Lisa,
just to be clear, just for the people. When I was dating my wife,
there you go.
Early on, this conversation had come up because I was writing blogs, and this has been something we've been writing about since like 2000, since a minute. But I remember telling her, I was like, America can't have been a Christian nation and allow its citizens to worship any other God. Sure. Like, even if you're going to take the 10 commandments and you're going to put it in a courtroom or in a school, the first commandment is you shall have no other God before me. Mm. That's the first commandment. Yeah. You can't have that. Just does not square with freedom of religion. It just doesn't. Yeah. And so immediately, you haven't gotten to the second one yet. That you have already missed the 10 commandment that you so covet, right? Because the American ideal of a free society is different than a kingdom-driven, spirit-led, submissive to God society.
See,
That isn't as free as democracy is at the end of the day.
Can I jumble this? I'm going to just jumble this.
Jumble.
Because I want to. What I would say is, a Christian kingdom, is also free. Gives you the freedom to worship the way you want to worship, right? In this way, right? Like if it's a actual, the kingdom. Right, the kingdom of God, like in the presence, God is over, and the one we're getting prepped for heaven and all that stuff. It's not that. Like God is the only one. But it seems that as people are gathering themselves in kind of these nations and whatnot, even if they were to put a Christianity on that, the God Himself as a ruler is like, look, I'm not going to make you do the things that I've told you to do.
Right.
I want you to choose it.
Right. I mean, I think
it's a jumble. Right?
I think He has done that, but my point is, if the 10 Commandments is your thing,
okay, that's fair. Yeah.
Right.
So if that's going to be the governing,
right. You're like, oh, we got to put the 10 Commandments back up in our government. Okay, well, we have a conflict
from the start,
on word number 7. Like immediately when you say the Bible, like the Bible says, don't charge interest. In that same Old Testament, we do.
Are we going to go back and like use the whole Old Testament law? Like if we're going to go back to the Old Testament, we got a lot more laws than that.
I know, but that's the deal.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like if we're going to walk down this road, then we have to hold the Constitution up against the Old Testament law.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find that that's different. And of course, most of us will be like, well, that's ridiculous. Okay, I agree. Why are we doing that? And then you say, well, Christ, and you bring Christ in. And well, Christ says a kingdom, I bring my kingdom here, and He's invited us into that. He's not inviting us into a natural society. He's inviting us into a supernatural kingdom and society. And so that's not going to happen through the government.
Yeah.
And then being born into the family of God, which is what it means to be a Christian, isn't going to happen by works. Isn't going to happen by following the right laws or not being a criminal. It's going to happen by accepting Christ and being regenerated, be born again, and have His Holy Spirit deposited in you. None of those things happen through. So if the goal is to help our nation be Christians,
yes,
right? The avenue to that path isn't the government.
Yeah.
Nothing about the government takes us there.
I think I want to grab it's what you said is really helpful. It's not about being a Christian nation, but being Christians who help our nations become Christians.
Right. And if that's the goal, then politics don't help us, which is why I started with, what are we trying to do?
Yeah.
Now, if we're trying to look like Christians or like, or hold America to its standard of the Constitution or some other thing that has nothing to do with actually converting people into being regenerated, born again, new creatures, right? Who live from a supernatural, spirit-led and spirit-empowered life. Well, again, then this social cultural Christianity, I suppose, little c Christian, I suppose you might be able to try to pull that off over here which is what they did with Constantine and what we've seen in history, where they try to behavior modify people into what Timothy would say, a form of Christianity, but never knowing the truth. Like we end up in 2 Timothy 3 at that point.
Yeah.
Right. And people who will not be bought into what it means to be Christian and not be bought truly into what it means to follow God, but just will go after the things that make sense to them. And as he says in Timothy, they itching ears and
sure. Well,
that kind of thing.
Well, look, you brought in, I think, a great example of the last time that we tried to do a Christian nation, right? Constantine taking on Catholicism as the state language, and ultimately, as it moved throughout and spread, if you will, throughout the world, it became one in which people were forced into doing it, right? Slavery came out of this, right? Which we already talked about, this idea of I'm going to Christianize you ultimately by making you my slave. Now you're going to be in You're going to be in relationship with me, even though you're in a slave relationship. You'll be in relationship with me, and therefore you might be able to understand and get to know more about who Christ is. But of course, when we got to the United States, it's like if they become a Christian, what does that mean? Does that mean they're free from slavery, as if like everybody else, and they had to deal with that, and the church got in on that, right? And so I think that's a really important thing for as we think about governing and using government for that. You can go even further back. You can go back to the Israelites wanting to have a king, and God's like, hey, what are you doing? They wanted to be like all the other nations.
You don't
and
need
do
that. Yeah.
Right. And now here's what I will say though too is I think what we're talking about is in terms of this very spiritual piece, but humanity exists in body and soul, right? So there is a way in which the body of the flesh and people in body are being engaged in a social environment that I believe when Christ came and even incarnated into the body, spoke to, right? And spoke about, right? And encouraged Christians to engage people where their bodies are being torn and put asunder and marginalized as well. Yeah. And so I think the Christian, beyond just looking, hey, how do we live in such a way as to demonstrate, which I think the witness part is big, and demonstrate it so that people may want to engage from a spiritual standpoint. I think there's also a demonstration about fighting for the rights of the poor, right? Fighting for those who are marginalized. I think we get that demonstrated in the Bible, and even called out. We are called to, in some ways, Jesus says, hey, the people who go into heaven are the people who will go and visit and go and do those things. And in a democracy, again, I think Alexia Salvatierra said it best. I mean, Christ didn't live that. He didn't live in a democracy. So the only way that he can engage this conversation is through the kind of spiritual and kind of one-on-one kind of dealing with the body as well. Whereas we have these gifts of democracy. So how then do we steward them with a government, right? Knowing that there's a government that can make a difference in the ways people's bodies are being treated and engaged in our society as well. Yeah. So I think that's where I think the American version of society, actually there's parallel. Okay, there's congruency in what the forefathers wrote, as far as like every man. I mean, if we just every person should be equal, even though we know what it was written for and who was not included. But in that. But freedom of choice, like the Constitution is close, right? It's close enough to the true. I mean, it's close enough to a society that Christianity can get on board with it and continue to advocate along its same lines until it gets to the spiritual. Honestly, until it gets to the actual Christian part. Okay. Like the actual Christian part is the supernatural stuff. Okay. Like the rest of it, love your neighbor. Yeah. Like there's a series of these things that most people don't have a problem with. Again, generally, we don't want police officers to get away with doing shady stuff. We don't like fraud. We don't want thieves to be able to get away clean. We don't, we want freedom. We want, there's a series of ideas that really flow congruently with what you're saying. It's the Christian part. Like it's the thing that makes something. It's the Christ and the Christian part. And nationalism sounds like as a I don't know, a decent, I guess, marketer brain. Like that sounds like a branding term. Okay. That sounds like what we want people to know is like, this is who we are. We are the Christian nation. So if you want to know about Christianity, look at us. And no, America's not that. We talked about, and I think you made a great point of going, hey, even the Ten Commandments is really looking at a Judeo version, right? Shmevan, you talked about going even beyond the Ten Commandments, the 931 laws or whatever it was before, even though it was turned into 10. And then we move into a Christian space, sort of the place where Jesus shows up, and he takes those 10 laws and turns them into 2, right? Love God, love others, right? Those are kind of the 2 major things. But I think if we think about it, even how Christ talks about what the Christian is supposed to do, after he leaves, ultimately, he gives us that in Acts 1:6-8, right? Where after he's been resurrected and he's out about to ascend. He's on the mountain, going to ascend. The disciples don't know he's going to ascend, and they come to him and go, "Hey, Jesus, is now the time that we will make Israel into a great nation."
Right.
Right. And again, this what Willie Jennings calls this nationalist fantasy. Now, they weren't technically Christians at this moment, right? This is the beginning of the church, but they will be evolving into that.
Sure.
So you could call it a Christian nationalist fantasy. We want to create
definitely post Old Testament.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's definitely this sense of, hey, we've been oppressed by these people, these Gentiles for a long time, these places. We would like to create a nation. If you're telling us, because before this, he said, go and make disciples of all non-Christians, or excuse me, all non-Jews, basically, right? Go make disciples of all nations. And they're going, oh my gosh, you want us to like engage all nations, these nations that have done these things to us, that have oppressed us, that have enslaved us, all these things. You know what would make that much easier, Jesus? If we could make a nation that was underneath our rules and ordinances, and that ultimately if people didn't do it, that we can punish them for it, it would be so much easier then to tell them about you, right? Which is, the antithesis, I think, of what Jesus tells them after that. He goes, hey, why are you worrying about this nation thing? That's God's doing all that. What you need to do is be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So his move was not to make a nation, right? But he was making witnesses who would go into all the nations and be witnesses. I think if you force people with the Jesus piece, then they want less of the Jesus piece.
Yeah. The other part of this is this idea that Christians, that a lot of people, when they think about Christian nation, they're still imagining a transactional God.
Okay.
Right? And so for them, they're like, hey, we got to be we got to at least say we're pro God and put a good foot forward for it, because if we don't, God's going to be mad at us.
Okay.
And he's going to destroy America. He's going to destroy America. And that's why America's going to hell, going to hell in a handbasket, because if we don't do it right, then God's going to bring judgment upon us. And there's a good amount of people that when they think about Christian nationalism, it's basically them trying to tell God, hey, we're America's pro you. Don't come for us.
But there's this group of people that somehow think that America has some supernatural
Special
blessing.
connection. Yeah.
And there's nothing in Scripture that would suggest that God considers America any different than any other country. But we think that we're his emissaries, and that our nation has been created to bring Christianity to the world. And even, Marcus, you were talking about the idea that if we created this Christian nation, that we could then use it to bring Christianity. But now we're trying to take a government and use it to force the agenda of Christ on the rest of the world, which is not the model that Scripture told us. Like, that's not, we were called to be witnesses and to talk about what God's done for us, not to create a structure with an army that would go and shut down anybody else that has a different point of view.
Right. We've done that. We have done this before. So this is not new. Anybody ever heard of the Crusades? Anybody know the Crusades? Like, this is exactly the thing that Christians are always having to apologize for in our very society, is that we have done this before, that we have forced. I mean, when you start to go into black neighborhoods and they're dealing with the Kemet, the Egyptian sort of religion, one of the things that this very sort of pro-black religious engagement brings to bear is to say that Christianity is a white man's religion, and it has been used to force itself on black people, and in many ways have copied and stolen black practices and made them their own and appropriated them themselves. Right. So we've already been down. And look, I'm actually gonna change that. The what's the word I'm looking for? The way that Christians have been seen, right? We have had to almost own this Christian nationalist, this crusade, this Christian country pursuit by Christians in history. And the issue that I have with that is I don't really believe that was Christian.
Right.
Right. Again, I go back to it's Christendom.
Yeah.
And with the emphasis on the dumb. It's Christendom. It is a false testament and testimony of Jesus. It is a false witness of Jesus in the world. And so all of these things that people, when they look at Christianity and see all the crusades, and they see what happened with slavery, and they see what they did to the Native Americans here, and the boarding schools and the residential schools, and when they see all of that, and they call that out in Christianity. They're calling out Christendom, but they're not calling out Christianity. Before Rome, before Constantine, there was a whole nother way in which Christianity was maneuvering throughout the world, and most of the time, it was a visiting team.
Right.
It was experiencing persecution, and having to self-sacrifice for others in their space, right? And so me, it's already hard to have the conversation of what if we make America into this Christian beacon. It's like, hey, we've tried that road before, and you misrepresented. We misrepresented who Christ was in that approach and in that procedure.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we immediately have an issue.
Yeah.
We saw Jesus shut this down in the garden, right? With Peter.
Yeah.
Like Peter said, "Hey, look, there's gonna let's fight this." And I think anytime we start to pull the sword, anytime we start to fight we're just gonna use force to push God's agenda. He doesn't need us to do that. And he shut it down before. If he wanted that to be the path, then Christ would have been a conquering king.
Yeah, he would have come in on a horse instead of a donkey. And let's just be clear, God is the most powerful entity in the universe. If he wanted to make us do anything, he would have done it. But he did what I think is one of the craziest things, is he gave us free will.
Gave us choices. That scene with Peter is always so interesting to me, because Peter's like, "Here's my sword," and then Jesus is like, "I am he," and his voice.
They're the ones.
His voice tosses everyone back, and so it's clearly Jesus. Like, look, you do realize if I don't want to go with y'all, I don't have to, right?
I don't have to.
Because I am he. You all fell to the ground. I didn't even do anything.
Yeah.
So clearly, this isn't about power.
Right.
I have more than you.
Right.
I'm doing something else.
Right. Okay. So where does this desire for Christian nationalism?
I think it's a closet. Why is closet like automatically like this negative thing?
Here's the problem. Like, because
everybody was waiting for something sinister after I
I
said
know,
closet.
but you got your prayer closet. My grandma had a prayer closet.
Okay, good. All right.
So I'm gonna give it a positive.
Okay,
Right.
there you go. But I don't mean it that way. I mean it as a negative.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
The closet. I think people, as I told you often, we are so hopelessly addicted to ourselves. And so I think for many people, their personal identity is so wrapped in the American identity that they need to baptize it into Christianity in order to consistently and forever put themselves as the hero of the story.
Okay.
For whatever it is that they do. And I think a lot of this Christian nationalism is just people fighting for their spot, but doing so in a way that they can feel good about themselves. It's for my white brothers and sisters who are like, we need Christian nationalism because it's going to save America. I think for many persons who are thinking that way, it's not everybody, but for many people who are thinking that way, what they're really saying is, I don't want to be in the minority.
Yeah.
And because I think the people who aren't me and the people who aren't like me aren't Christians. And they're going to make things bad for us. So we need to be in power so that my position is safe. Well, and I think that's sitting subconsciously for some people, and maybe consciously for some others.
Conscious for a lot of
I think it's far less about for many people, not everyone. It's far less about the actual Christianization of so many things we do in our political realm. We say we want the outcomes of.
Yeah.
But we don't check whether what we're doing actually leads to those outcomes. We say these things because we think they sound good. When in reality, we're just fighting for our own individual thoughts and ideals. And so maybe I'm cynical in that way, but I think there's a good bit of people who are hiding behind the cross.
Yep.
With their own individual agendas, and it feels safe to do that.
Well, because I think they feel powerless, or they feel that their power is becoming less.
And the God card is one powerful card.
Absolutely, right? And I think you can see. I think it's a temptation of anybody, right? If you have, in many ways, if you have power, been in power, but I'll say specifically for the church in America. again, historically, if you've been white and Christian in this country, you've been in a really powerful position.
Yeah.
In fact, some would say that is actually the cultural identity of America is white Protestants, right? I think Samuel Huntington, I think he's an old scholar, kind of articulated that this idea of a white Protestant or an Anglo-Saxon Protestant is the cultural identity of America. And I think there's some folks who, when they see this 2042 or 2050 sort of idea of the diversity becoming majority minority, ultimately those who are non-white becoming more than those who are white, they get fearful. And I want to go further in on what you said. I think that they not only are afraid that those people are not Christians, they're afraid that those folks, these non-white folks, will do to them what the white folks did to the brown folks, black and brown folks over the course of American history. And so I think what we're seeing right now is sort of this death rattle of, if I can say, some in white Protestant America who's trying to fight for this power so that they can protect themselves from what they maybe assume is going to come at them. And I think it's a very typical sort of farce or choice that I think the devil puts in front of us as human beings, and particularly as Christians. And we can see it in Jesus's own temptation, right? It's the first is survival, right? Turn this stone into bread. And I think we fight to keep power so we can survive. I think the second is we want to dominate our way, right? And so when Jesus is asked by Satan to bow down to him, and then if he bows down to Satan, then he can do his work without any problem. All right, this is ultimately us going, we need to bow down to something that is of ourselves and something of the world to be able to do the work that we're doing. So it's a domination in a comfortable way, and it's a domination that's sans God, right? It's in a way that's going to be best for us. And then what we do after that is we want a divine cosign on that. And this is, I think, when Jesus said, "Hey," when devil tells Jesus, "Jump off this temple, and the angels will come, and they will save you." I think that's a very public act that Jesus would do. And if the angels come and save him, he will get this divine cosign. They're like, "Oh my gosh, God must be really about this guy. We must listen to everything he says." And so, for the Christian, the temptation is to put God on everything that we do, so that it sounds really good and practical, and then to use that word as power. God is behind this, and so we do a divine cosign. So I think we fall into the temptation when we are stressed, much like Jesus, right? The devil waited 40 days until Jesus at his weakest. And I think we right now feel very weak. Yeah. And in the midst of that weakness, the devil has shown up and said, "Hey, would you like to survive? Would you like to dominate? Would you like to put God's name on it?" And I think many of us, because we're so used to being powerful, particularly my white brothers and sisters, we don't know what to do but take those temptations. Yeah. Where I think, again, thinking at my own sort of black experience, like there's no expectations in the black community that we would ever be powerful or in power. We have always had to, we don't expect justice to happen, right? We always have to think, how do we work when justice doesn't happen? Right. How do we do things when things don't go our way, when things aren't fair? And that's how we have grown and been strengthened throughout our time. And so I think Christianity needs to think of the same thing, because honestly, pre-Constantine, that's what Christian life was.
That's what it was.
And that's when it grew. And in most countries all over the world that aren't quote unquote Christian outposts or weren't, Christianity grew in the midst of persecution. It grew in the midst of being a visitor. And now we have more outposts of Christianity across the world. And in fact, the South and the East actually boasts of more Christians than the North and the West does right now, as opposed to when it did. So I think that there's a way in which Christianity is fearing, and they're taking these temptations that the devil has given them.
You're talking about the fear, and I think what is so revealing about the fact that we're being encouraged to be fearful is this blending between what do I need to defend my Christian rights, but the other rights that seem to be defended alongside of it that have nothing to do with Scripture, rights like Second Amendment rights and things like that seem to be just as important as my right to pray is also my right to carry a weapon. Right. Because I have to be ready to defend myself, because there's going to come a battle and I got to like they're coming for me. And so we have this fearful thought that we just better be ready, because there is a fight coming, and so we need our Bible, and we need our gun.
Yeah, faith, flag, firearms. Right, you see the signs when you're in certain places, and I think that's absolutely right. There's a fear of being taken and taken over. And so I think that's the place where Christianity can go too far. If not to put too much of a bow on it. But
I know, yeah. And I think it can go too far in that area and not far enough in the other area.
In the other area, letting America
letting the church be what it ought to be instead of
and letting America be what it ought to be. Okay.
Right. So like
America being what it ought to be under its own constitution,
that's right,
under its own national laws, things of that nature, recognizing that when you are a witness or an ambassador, you have to adhere to the laws of the land that you're planted in, even though you're from a place that has different laws, and you may be able to even kind of go and say, hey, these laws might help you, and they're like, forget you, we don't want them. Well, you don't adjust it because there's another place that you get to be a part of that has those, and you're just a witness and ambassador to that there.
Yeah,
that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about that, and I'm talking about like if there's going to be a judgment, the it's God's people who will get, it's the church. The church will, not America. Like I've always wondered, like, man, like we have a terrible, we have no excuse in America, because like guys, like he comes to the American church. He's like, hey, what have you done with the stuff I've given you?
What have you done for me? All right.
But what have you done with the stuff I gave you money. I gave you
Is
power.
This the 10 talents?
I gave you,
Okay.
I gave you influence. I gave you the majority. I gave you, what'd you do with all that?
Slavery, genocide.
So if there's judgment, and by judgment, I just mean discipline.
Yeah.
Which is what Hebrews says God does of his children.
Right.
Not America, but the children. Right. So it's God's people who might receive some discipline. It's when in Revelations, when John is writing back to the seven churches, the consequence is that their candle's going to get taken out of the lampstand, which is to say your influence will be removed. You will no longer be the light, the witness, and have the power and the influence of a witness in this space because you are no longer representing the entirety of who I am. And so the discipline is going to come to the church, not to. So it's the church that has to think about itself and evaluate itself and its witness. And it's that not the government. Like it's God's people. And what we're seeing now is the church is its witness is tough.
Yeah. Can I go in on that? Just
right now.
This is maybe we'll end with this to some extent.
Yeah.
What you said is why I am completely against Christian nationalism. I'm completely against the idea of trying to make America into a Christian nation. Do y'all fools know what that means?
That's a high standard, right?
I mean, when you put God's name on your nation, God is going to come.
He's like, all right, we doing this?
We doing this. Okay, so what are you doing that actually models who I am? And again, people are like, we used to be a Christian nation. We put God's name. I think we did put God's name on this nation. And that's historically in the Bible, that is a bad move. If you watch the Israelites all through their story, they put God's name on it as soon as they didn't do what they supposed to.
Yeah, man.
God came. It was I got to come in here and discipline.
I got to clean it up, man.
Right.
Can't have my name out there like that.
Can't have my name out there. So there's slavery. There's being taken to other places, conquering, exploitation. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing. And Amos is the book, right? Like it's just so I'm watching this is God. Like I'm watching all these kingdoms around you, and they're doing terrible things. But they don't know better, and you do.
Right.
So you're going to put my name on it and then exploit the poor and not give them representation in court, right? And I know you got money, and I know you showing up at your church services, but your services and your things are like noise to me. Like I don't even want to hear it. I want to cover my ears because they're bunk. They're not real. So, and this is the great part or the terrible part about Amos as opposed to some of the others. When Amos shows up, he ain't coming in there going, hey, y'all got 70 days to fix it. Y'all got 3 years to fix it. He's like, it's too late.
No, it's coming.
It's coming. The discipline's coming.
And it's the same discipline that they're getting.
They're getting. And that's why I'm like, Christians, stop trying to put God's name on this country. It cannot hold up to God's name. Just be witnesses in the country of who God is. Because you put his name on this thing.
Yeah. I mean, and vote. You know what I'm saying? Like no one's saying. No, I mean, I'm not saying don't vote.
Yeah.
And if the Lord is, called you to public service, serve.
Right.
Serve the public.
Yes. Bring your witness into the public square.
Like follow the Spirit's leading. And I think the Spirit does lead some of his people into political realms.
Right.
I just don't think that his strategy for Christianizing and bringing the gospel to America is through the White House.
Okay.
You don't think that God's been
it's through the church?
God hasn't been sitting back just going,
if they can only vote in the right person.
One day, if they would just get that right,
if they would
I can
just
get this
vote in the
figured
right
out.
person, we can finally Christianize America. Yeah, not really.
No. Good stuff. I like that. I mean, there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's been helpful for, those who are out there. Pep, it's been helpful for you. I know you've been kind of sitting over there listening, but it's helpful. Is it? Has it transformed your whole life? Is what?
I don't think I need to have another evaluation. I won't be sending you any more.
No more. Thank you.
Night.
That's the end of the Say What episode.
That is the end of the segment.
We
No
have
more.
no material to use right now. Good. Yes. So okay, fantastic. Well, hey man, this is good.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Appreciate you guys out there watching as well. Again, as we come into the Christianity in the Public Square, we really have been dealing with questions. Like instead of answering everything, it's kind of like, let's pose these questions. Let's talk through this. Let's try to engage it from the different sides and why would we think like that? And so that's what we've been trying to engage with you. And honestly, a lot of this stuff is very difficult to kind of put your mind around. But I think that taking the time to really investigate, to converse, and really pray what God wants you to do, I think is such an important aspect of what we're doing here at the same time. Now, hey, look, if this is something that you're like, man, I want more of this, make sure that you subscribe, right, and hit that bell notification. That's right, Antoine. Hit
ding,
that
ding.
ding bell notification to make sure that you get this stuff as it comes. And we're going to be creating not only color commentary, Christianity Public Square videos, but other videos as well. So always come back to wearethreaded.org/YouTube, and you're going to find lots of ways. In fact, we've been kind of talking about this Just Start campaign.
Yeah.
And we've been engaging in, just really understanding that a lot of the stuff we're talking about, man, this racial engagement, particularly as we talk about it in the thread, it's just so overwhelming, right? And sometimes it just takes one little step. In fact, this organization was started by a gentleman calling me and saying, hey, I want to talk about this police shooting that I've seen. And 10 years later, we're 10 years from that moment, all of this exists, right? So sometimes it takes just one small step to go through. You're looking at the journey, and instead of getting caught up in all the obstacles, that you just start, right? And so what you can do with that is just start by getting educated. So hit that subscribe, be educated here with us. But you can also start by, using resources. I know there's lots of resources that needed for this conversation,
right,
and not one person can do it. So, hey, just start with Threaded by supporting Threaded. Man, we're looking for a lot of folks to come in as donors at just $10, just as little as $10 a month. You can go to wearethreaded.org/give, and you can be a $10 a month supporter to make sure that shows like this and organizations like what Threaded is doing in the racial space and having these conversations can last and can continue on. So hopefully that helps you get in there on that. So, hey, Color Commentary, this is who we are, and want to give a shout out to Shmevin in the Megamind layer over there as well. Shmevin, thank you for being here. And of course, put some pepper on it. So glad you're here, Pep. Always good to have you in here, getting your voice in even more. We want more. I want more pepper. The food is not quite
seasoned
spicy.
enough.
It's not seasoned enough.
Just
I need
a little more. That's okay though. She's getting there.
She's getting there. I want full pep. I do like the hey everybody pep.
The people.
I like that. The
people must demand it.
That's the peppy. She
You
went
want
to the
real
pep.
pepper?
I want pepper, not peppy.
Yeah,
right?
I understand
I
that.
get all that stuff, right? So thanks for being here. Color Commentary. Shout out to you, Antoine, as well. Glad you're here as always. Glad you guys are watching as well. This is Colored Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. And this colored part of that title reminds you to just constantly be looking at the world through the multiple lenses of the people who are around you. And so that's why we encourage you every episode, you know what it is, that you are supposed to stay colored.